Hello and welcome to Cooking with Lisbeth. Today we are making sourdough bread. Yummy, yummy. So I have a starter that I've had for about 2 years now, and I've named her Precious. She needs a bit of feeding. You can tell there's a layer of water there that you can see. That just means that I've not fed her very recently. So we'll mix it all up again, give her a good feeding and make a yummy loaf of bread out of that today. Let's get started. So first things first, we're going to give her a feeding. So we'll get the scales out, and it's the same parts water to sourdough and flour. So we're going to do 100 grams of each. So I'm going to measure out 100 grams of the flour. For this I'm using Hovis granary bread flour. Normally you just use normal white bread flour, but I quite like the granary in things, so I'm using this today. There we go, 100 grams of that. Mix in some of my Precious. Just over 100 grams, so that'll be lovely. And then just rinse my thumb. We want 100 grams of water as well. And there's some water I've prepared at sort of room temperature, tepid warm. Just lets it feed a little bit better. So 100 grams of that. So feeding wise, you want to feed it about once a week if you leave it in the fridge. If you're leaving it out the fridge, you want it every 2 days or every day even, because she feeds a lot more. And then if you're going away on holiday to keep her alive, I highly recommend putting her in the freezer. It just slows the whole process down of the yeast, of her feeding, and then she'll last up to about a month really. And then when you come home, give her a good feeding and she'll revive beautifully. So there you can see it's quite a liquid dough that we've got left, and that we can now put back in the fridge and it will last another week. So we've got a little glass jar ready. She lasts best in glass, and she doesn't really like metal and doesn't much like plastic either, so I highly recommend a glass jar of some sort to keep her happy. Go, and that is good to go into the fridge. Do be aware, she does grow when she eats, so if I don't use this in the next couple of days, this will overflow, so I need to be aware of that myself. So onto the bread now. You want ratios of about 500 grams of flour to 300 ml of water, and with sourdough, because it's so kneady in a way, you want 10 grams of salt. Normal bread loaves I'd only use about 5 to 7 grams of salt, so that's the main difference there. So I'm going to keep using my Hovis granary flour, and I want about 500, but I'm also put it in. So we have 500 grams exactly there, well 526, so that's okay. And then into this flour we want 10 grams of salt. I'm using crystals of rock salt. I personally prefer the natural salt, as little messed with as possible, so that's why I get these sort of crystalled ones. And then if my scales are just playing up, if I need to have it finer, I've got a little salt grinder that I just put it into, but this way not got any caking agents or any messiness in with your salt. And there we go, 10 grams of that. There we go, 10 grams. And then I'm going to add in my sourdough. Could say about 200 grams of liquid sourdough, which is what we've got here of my Precious. So let's see how much of it we use. There, that's 200. So there's a little bit left, and that will just be rinsed out later on because we don't need that much. And then what I do, just for my own peace of mind, you don't need it, I just give a tiny, I have some dried yeast here, I just give a tiny sprinkling, literally there, smallest little pinch. I just seem to find it works really nicely. I've done it without any, I've done it with loads of it, and I just find just a little sprinkling seems to help the sourdough along in raising the bread while it's resting. So there we go. And then I had slightly over 500 grams of flour, so I'm going to add 312 grams, there or thereabouts, of this lukewarm water from the, just tap water is fine. $318 grams, there we go. So that's already it, that's all that goes into my bread. And I'm going to give it a good mixing. It smells, you can smell it. It's got this nice sour smell to it that I really like with the sourdough. And you can do exactly the same recipe, just using about a bag of yeast, so that's what, 10 grams, 7 to 10 grams of dried yeast. And that'll do the same thing. You don't need the sourdough. I just really like the sourdough because it gives it that extra little bit of sour flavour at the end. And actually sourdough will last a lot longer once baked than a normal bread. So there we go. There's just a bit of liveliness going on in there because sourdough is an alive form of yeast, which I'm very passionate about. I find it very exciting to know that I have something living that's kind of helping my bread grow. It's rather fantastic. So there, we've got ourselves roughly mixed nice dough. So now we come to the kneading process, which you can either do by hand, very good for you and the dough, get your hands in there, it'll be really wet so it really takes a while. I'm cheating and I'm using a dough hook with my very special K-mix there. So I'm just going to get the dough hook in there, swirl it around a bit, and then you're going to knead it on a slow speed for 4 minutes, high speed for 7 minutes, and then I'll meet you back here. At high speed for 7 minutes, and it's still nice and wet looking, really soft to the touch. There we go. And there's my lovely dough now. And then just to let it prove, we're going to let it prove for half an hour, fold it down again, and then another half hour. So I've just got a little bit of olive oil here. I'm going to pour over the top half, just a little bit. Fold the dough over and get some in the bottom as well, just to stop it from sticking. So as it rises, it has space to rise and doesn't get stuck to the edges of the ball. There we go, nice little ball. That's what it looks like. And then we're going to cover this with a damp cloth and just leave it somewhere warm to sit and rise. So it should rise quite a bit, almost double in size, and then we'll fold it down. So here I've got a nice Christmas tea towel. Got that nice and moist. Cover the bowl. And then we just leave this now for half an hour to do its magic. So now, almost being just over half an hour, let's have a look how the bread's doing. There, it's risen a little bit. It's a little bit flat, but that's okay because it's got another good half hour of rising. So we're just going to fold it in on itself, just Just a little bit. That's it. Cover it again. And now we'll leave it again for a good half hour, somewhere nice and warm. And that'll just let it do its thing. Let's have a look at that. That's looking lovely. It's really risen loads there, so that's good, double the size. And then we'll get a mat to put it onto. So I'm going to make 2 loaves out of this. So I'm using my dough hook cutter. Just taking it away from the edges. It will deflate quite a bit, but the less you press it down, the fluffier your bread will be at the end. So just as little messing with it as possible. There, so that's my first loaf. And I'm just going to fold it in thirds. And again in thirds. I'm just trying to be quite gentle, not to push too much of the air out. And that just helps it again. When you're folding it over like that, you're trapping bits of air in there, and that just helps it build up some fluffiness. And then I'll just leave it on here just to start building up again for about 20 minutes before we then put it in the oven. And then get the second loaf out. There we go. And this one we're going to do slightly differently. We're going to make it slightly more round. So just fold the edges in on itself. This will be a nice round loaf of bread. Again, just operating it very lightly so you're not getting all the nice air out of it. Shape it into whatever shape you want, really. You can also make rolls out of this. You can make it more lengthy. I'm going to make this one a little bit longer. There we go. There, so they're definitely separate shapes. And then again, we'll just cover it with a damp cloth and leave it for about 20 minutes. You can start heating the oven in this time, just so that that gets nice and warm for the bread to go into. And the oven will be at around 210 to start off with, 210, 215. And then sort of 10 minutes in, we'll turn it down to 180. But we'll go through that again. That's 20 minutes. My oven is heating up to 215. It's just reached temperature. And I've got a bit of a steam going on in there. If you don't have a steam oven, as you put the bread in, just put in a cup of water at the bottom, throw it in there immediately, it'll steam up, close the oven, and that will help give you a crusty crust to your bread, crunchy crust. And I've just got a little razor blade here, just to make a cut. If you don't have a razor blade, just use a knife. Sharp knife always does a better job. And we're just going to make a few cuts into our bread. That's just so when it rises, it kind of pushes through and it's got somewhere to go, because otherwise the crust will cover it all and it won't be able to rise and reach its full potential. So on this one, you can do any shapes you want. Doesn't really matter. And then that can go straight into the oven. So we'll leave it for 10 minutes at high temperature, and then we'll turn the temperature down to about 180. That's just to give it that initial crust, and then we'll just bake it, and it will be done in about half an hour. Okay, that should be the bread ready. So we'll just grab out, excuse me buddy. Something like this is ideal to let the bread dry on, because otherwise if it stays on a solid surface it'll go soggy on the bottom. Something that lets air in underneath will help dry the bread beautifully. Then to check if the bread is done, you want to take it out of the oven and tap the bottom, and you want it to sound hollow, like someone knocking on a door. If it sounds a bit soggy or flat, it means the bread's not quite done. You really want it to have a hollow sound. So let's have a look how the bread is doing. So it feels a bit soft still, so let's see. And there's still a bit of give there, so I'm just going to give it an extra couple of minutes. Let's have another look. That's nice. You can have a look here. I don't know if the sound will pick it up. It's got a really nice knocking hollow sound. So they are looking. And then you want to leave them for at least 10 minutes just to cool down a bit before slicing into it. And fresh bread tastes best with just a little bit of butter on it, sliced up, and you could eat a whole loaf, no problem. Just be careful, don't. But super tasty, and yeah. The next day, obviously, toasted, bread and butter, whatever you want. But it does taste best with just a hint of butter when it's this fresh out of the oven.